No, I'm still Fiona Dong.
You right to go, Steve?
Yep.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all safe, healthy, and enjoying the sunny weather. I'd like to begin this session by acknowledging the traditional custodians and the land which we are all respectively located today, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and those emerging. I'd also like to extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people attending today. The team at EDSN would like to welcome you to our second seminar and panel session for 2020, Client Staff Retention, Maintaining Effective and Long-Lasting Relationships in the NDIS. I would like to especially thank our panel of experts for giving up their time and sharing their experience and knowledge, and the team at the EDSN for putting this together. I hope you all enjoy and can take a few things home that you can put in your toolkit and use later. Retention can be defined as the continued use, existence, possession, or engagement with someone. There is the notion that staff or client retention relates to the efforts by which organisations attempt to retain their staff and or clients. Therefore, retention can be viewed as a strategy, not an outcome, or rather than an outcome. On that thought, let's turn on our microphones, delve into the experiences of our panel members, and sit back and enjoy what promises to be an interesting and intriguing discussion. I'd like to now introduce Steve Lowe, our MC, who will introduce our panel members and poke this sleeping bear as discussions start. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much, Hugh, and welcome to everyone. My name is Steve Lowe. I am a committee member on the Eastern Disability Services Network. I'm also a regional coordinator for the Boosting Local Care Workforce program, which is an initiative which supports NDIS providers in the NDIS and aged care sectors, giving you guys support and resources and feeding back issues to the department. I'm joined today by Dave Glazebrook, who is the Innovation and Development General Manager for Melba, Jade Polkinghorn, the Manager of Consulting for Sachs Consulting, Christina Rao, Workforce Development Officer at Dandenong and Districts Aborigines Co-op Limited, and Fiona Dollar and Rachel Walters from New Wave Gippsland. New Wave is a self-advocacy group for people with intellectual disability or acquired brain injury living in Gippsland. They work together to make sure they have the same rights, choices and opportunities as anyone else in the community. And we look forward very much to having a chat. Now, as we are chatting, if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. We will either try and answer the questions live, or if I talk too much, we will, we've got a panel of EDSN members behind the scenes who will respond to any issues and questions via email. And as always, we are always happy to follow up after the meeting, either through EDSN or BLCW. Dave, I'm going to start with you, because when we talk about maintaining relationships with clients and staff, two words get brought up a lot, and they're culture and strategy. And you know, we think of Peter Drucker saying that culture beats strategy for breakfast. Melba has had quite the decade. You've gone from a small organisation, you've grown your services naturally, you've merged with other organisations, and you've taken on some other services in regional areas. So over the last 5-10 years, when you hear that Peter Drucker phrase, does culture eat strategy for breakfast, do you agree?
You've got to watch, I think you've got to watch both. So our culture is critical to us. We main things like, you know, we want, you know, that it's the zero tolerance approach to abuse and neglect. We see everybody as equal, having the same human rights as everybody else. So the culture, and I think what we've hung on to throughout the entire process and deliberately going for growth is the culture. If we can't maintain the culture, there's no point in doing the growth. And Melba, when it first started back in '72, made a commitment to people: we would be there for life for you if that's what you want. And there are individuals we support today who stuck with us, who started back in '72, '73, and there are new people coming through the door. So if you make that commitment to someone, your culture's critical. So it's probably more like going, whatever strategy you do has to reflect your culture. And they've been our sort of rambling conversations. I mean, like an interesting stat, and I know this because I had to pull them out for the board. If you look at 18-19, we delivered something like about 350,000 hours of service to people. And last year in 19-20, we delivered over 1 million hours of service to people. So that's a really significant growth for any organisation. But like to us, that's the business, delivering service to people. And are they happy with the service we've delivered to people? So yeah, there we go. Culture's critical. Culture rules, and whatever strategy you have must reflect that culture. Growth for growth's sake is a waste of time, and it will be detrimental to your organisation. More importantly, it will be detrimental to the people you are there to provide supports to. There you go.
Hey, Jade, and thank you, Dave. Is culture in an organisation homogenous?
I think that the most important thing to take from that initially is what the definition of culture is, because it's really important that the culture is clearly defined. And I guess we would take that a step further to say that engagement eats strategy for breakfast, because if you think about that positive mindset, employees having high levels of well-being, I guess that's when it can be, and it's really important to be homogenous. So clarity is critical when it comes to organisation culture, and I guess that cascading of strategic intent in terms of every level of the organisation understands what the culture is, what the outcomes are. If that's understood, then I guess that translates in terms of the way that the participants are supported as well.
Can I just jump back in, Steve, because I think it's relevant to declare. So Melba, in making a whole range of appointments it's done over the last couple of years, worked with SACS. And the reason we went to SACS was because we wanted an organisation to help us in this recruitment search that also had cultural alignment and the values alignment to Melba. So I just want to make it clear to anybody watching out there, we've worked closely with SACS in the last 2.5 years. So one, Jade, thank you for turning up today because you're here because I asked you. But I just want to be above board about this. Like SACS has been working with Melba for 2.5 years, but it was a really deliberate appointment. We went looking for a recruitment agency that had a values alignment with Melba. I'm sure there are others out there, but that's the choice we made.
And there are many, many thousands of us throughout our career who have completed the psychometric assessment testing from SACS. Me being one of them. I think what I'm really keen to draw on here a bit, Jade, is from what Dave was saying about how Melba approaches it, the challenge for Melba and Dave is to say, well, okay, this is what a general manager is saying. So a support worker in a group home in Sale, where I live, do we know that that's flowing through all aspects of the organisation? And that's why I thought, because when we were talking the other day, Jade, you mentioned a word, I think it was microcultures or microcosms. And I'm wondering, yes, there's going to be different microcosms and microcultures within a provider, but can we make sure, and they're all going to have their own regional and tropical sort of flavours, how do you make sure though that at their base is that core, that really important core values and culture that Dave talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, the first thing I would say is that culture is local. And as we were talking about the other day, what the research says is that only 20% of one's engagement in the workplace is attributed to the organisation that they work for. The remaining 80% is my job, my team that I belong to, and the leader that I report to. So it's really important that that engagement piece is critical at the local level. So you may find in different regional areas, different office locations that whilst it's the same organisation employing these people, the cultures and the behaviours may be completely different. So I guess it's really important to understand what those behaviours are, what the levels of engagement are, and that's when you can then approach, well, how do we ensure that there's consistency across all of our locations, all of our staff? And I guess that's when transparency is really important. We talk about communication being a good way to access those perhaps regional and geographically dispersed location as well, because there can be a feeling of isolation as well. So it's really important that people feel acknowledged, informed and valued by their organisation.
Christina, you've just done a whole piece of work in relation to your colleagues and your workforce. Are you sitting there sort of agreeing and nodding with Dave and Jade, or are you thinking about some other aspects about how you manage and maintain and keep and develop your workforce? Because you are a workforce development officer, so you're charged with developing the entire workforce of your organisation. You've got a big job.
Yes, well, what I've been thinking as you've been talking about culture and intention is so one thing I want to highlight. What I've noticed over the 18 months that I've been working with this Aboriginal organisation is that what keeps people, and we have very, very good retention rates. I mean, we've got attrition rates of less than 5%. It's quite enviable. And I think the primary reason for this is that the commitment to providing a service to the Aboriginal community. A lot of our staff come on board and also stay with us because they want to provide a service to the Aboriginal community. They feel like they're doing something worthwhile, and being a not-for-profit and being specifically targeting that community satisfies that need, I suppose, in our staff. And also a positive culture with positive team culture, commitment to the values of the organisation as a whole, such as teamwork, resilience, honesty and integrity. All of those values, I find that our staff are very committed to those values. And that also in turn ensures great customer service, because people who are committed to providing that service to the Aboriginal community, committed to the organisational values, will also provide a great service.
Why are staff committed? And is there things that an organisation can do? Now, whether they're a not-for-profit or a sole trader with a few employees or some subcontractors or a private company, who are all for purpose, because I think we can agree that whatever type of organisation or provider you are in the NDIS, we're all for purpose, whether it be a private company or an NGO. But why do people stay aligned to your culture and values? And is there active work you need to do to facilitate that?
Well, I mean, there's really not much that I have to do, because as I said, people from the outset, from when they apply to come and join us, and also while working for us, they're committed to better the lives of the Aboriginal community. It's as simple as that. They see a disadvantage in the community and they want to improve outcomes. And that's the sort of people that we want to hire, and that's how we do hire. Where we've been unsuccessful in hiring staff is where people haven't had that commitment. That's where we failed, where we got somebody who perhaps had the right skills and expertise to do the job, but didn't really have that greater sort of commitment to the organisational values or to serving the Aboriginal community. We make it a compulsory in all our selection criteria that there is a commitment and understanding of Aboriginal culture, sensitivity in communicating with the Aboriginal community, an understanding of just a general understanding of Aboriginal culture, and a commitment to improve outcomes for the community. So that's in all our selection criteria for all our jobs.
Yeah. So before I go to Fee and Rachel, because I'm very keen to get a participant's perspective on whether this culture and strategy really matters from their point of view. But before I do, Jade, Dave and Christina talked a lot about values and culture. From a recruiter recruiter's point of view, how do you quantify that? How do you, I mean, I can say, hey, I'm a caring person. How do you know?
We psych test them, Steve. So I guess there's things that we do as part of our recruitment approach. So SACS utilises a competency-based recruitment methodology. So we seek to deeply understand what the organisation wants this role to achieve in the real world. So really think about practically what would the signs be. So it could be client satisfaction is high, internal customer satisfaction. So my internal stakeholders feel well supported by my role. So it could be measurable things that are qualitative in a sense. But then I guess an example with Melba is that one thing that was made extremely clear is that they were not willing to settle when it came to a values alignment with the organisation. And the way that we did that was we interviewed key stakeholders within the organisation to really understand that ideal values alignment and what that looks like. And they reflected on the people that they think really live out their values. So if you're thinking about total commitment to human rights, that person-centred approach, that honest, ethical approach to the work that they do. We took that and then we translated that into, well, what does this look like in an ideal psychometric profile? And then we psych test them. So we're looking at their personal values. So there are particular values that we know based on the candidates that we have successfully placed at Melba that have done a really great job, that these values are really strongly aligned to the values of the organisation. And then there are also some personality characteristics which are really important to be able to do these types of roles really well and that we know are a really good fit with the culture. So I guess we probe it quite extensively when we're interacting with the candidates initially, but then when we get to a position where they've got the competencies to undertake the role, they've got the relevant experience, we also ask them, similar to what Christina said, they must answer a question that talks about how they live out their total commitment to human rights in the real world. So, I mean, that's something that every candidate at Melba is asked if they are progressed. So, and then we get the quantitative data that backs that up. So it's, I guess, a multifaceted approach, but it's been, I think Dave could probably attest to this, it's resulted in some great employees at Melba. And I think the stories that we're hearing that Melba shared with us have been really fabulous.
Now, Fiona and or Rachel, from a participant's point of view, and you guys are both NDIS participants, do you look at value statements of potential providers? Does this matter to you? Because obviously, as providers, I mean, if you listen, you know, Jade and Christina and Dave, they put a lot of time into making sure that they've got a really good culture and values that is participant focused. Can you notice, and does this matter?
Yeah, it does matter. Because you've got to have a good communication. As I said, I've got my review setting next week. I wish it was early in the year when I was actually wanting to change it around, but that's life. There's a few issues in that, but I won't get into that. But I've been getting really on well with the people I was with my group that I've got. There's only I've only got one thing at the moment because something else happening. So I'm just hoping even though I'm with that group, hoping next week it changes a lot.
So how, if you want to change something about a worker or a company or provider you're using, how do you do that? So
I've actually had one person who was assuming, she was a worker and she was assuming something. I rang up the company, told them that we just don't get along, and I haven't had it since.
And you've stayed with that company? I
stayed with that company.
What did the company say when you rang up?
All they just said is thanks for letting us know, and I mentioned that person's name, and they sort of that way, so I didn't have to have her anymore. You just don't assume stuff and you don't know someone.
So from your point of view, it's important that they understand, they get to know you.
Yeah. Get to know me really well. The ones that I do normally have, get on really well with, and have a good laugh. I'm very cheeky, so if I realise how thick I am, I've got someone who's as good as I am, so I'm thinking, oh dear, we're as bad as each other. But other than that, I've got no other issues, except I just need a few things to change, and I can't wait till next Wednesday that happens.
And we'll have our fingers crossed for you, and I'll follow up and find out.
Okay.
Fiona, does it matter to you, or the culture and values and psychometric testing?
In one way, yes. In another way, I don't believe you will fully be able to really ascertain what a person is like based on a psychological assessment. With experiencing plenty myself in the past, there's a lot of people that can say things on and write questions on the answers on psychological tests, which make them look and appear a lot more confident and able to do a task. I personally very much go by the actions of people and their communication with the client, as in with myself. If there's no clear communication, no understanding, no empathy, centre-based, it must be centre-based, person centre-based. I honestly don't think qualifications and psychological testing in itself is the only way I look at things.
No, they're part of a suite, and I'm sure Jade would, and I know Jade has lots of protections and in relation to validity of data they get, but they're absolutely part of the suite. They interview, and they've got a very holistic approach, Sachs. But what then, if you're looking for a company or a worker, what fee do you and other people at New Way of Gippsland, what sort of questions do you ask? How do you pick a provider or a company or a worker? What's your criteria?
I guess you look at the reviews of what sort of reviews they've had in the past by other participants. But you've also got to keep in mind that everyone is different. So it would probably more come down for me and the participants, I would think, the other participants, I think, would be an interview with the support person themselves to see if there's a connection. If there's no connection there, it really doesn't matter how qualified they are or how well they pass their psych evaluation, because communication is the best strategy in my point of view. So I would base my thought and my process on the interview process between the participant and the support worker. In the past, I've had support workers that I haven't had a chance to meet first, that have just come in, and I don't believe that that's the best way an organisation can run that process by offering support. You need to be able to actually meet the person, to know the person.
Yes.
To see that they understand you.
Yeah.
And your needs.
Because it's interesting, I was thinking the first job interview I ever had in this sector was as a support worker, and it was 30 years ago, because it's been 30 years that I've had a career in disability now. This year is the anniversary, but my first ever interview included the manager of the service, the man I was going to be supporting, and his mum, and that was the interview panel. So manager, person who lived with a disability, and their family member, their guardian. And for me, that was my entry into this sector, and it was a really good one because it was that equal relationship. There was the company or the provider with the person who was going to be spending the most time with me, the man living with a disability, and his mum. And I thought it was a really nice way. So I was really impressed to walk in and see the interview panel with those three people. And I supported that man for 12 years. So, you know, I was there for a while. But it is about those communications and that setting it up. But I think what made the difference for me was that all three stakeholders, employee, person with a disability, and the company, were in the same room and were all part of the interview. I know not everyone does that. I'm not necessarily saying you should. But Dave, you were saying before you've had some people who have stayed with you since 1972. Why? Have you asked them? Why are they still there?
Oh, that's a thing we are constantly. I'll get back to that. We're constantly, how do we get really good feedback from people as we get bigger is an issue right on the table now. No, because you do, because you know them and you talk to them. And you have to accept that this is a really, really weird job in terms of, you know, I could go and, you know, no, I couldn't because I'm rubbish, but I mean, let's assume I could go and asphalt someone's driveway. I could go and do the job, walk away again. I will be judged on how good the job was. You know, I could be grumpy, happy, whatever. It's completely irrelevant. This is a weird job. This is a weird vocation because no matter how professional you are about it, and we get paid money to do it, you form relationships. The value of what you do is about the relationship you have with individuals. And that's a component of it. And so throughout Melbourne's history, throughout my history in terms of both in youth services and disability, like it's the relationships and how you manage and how those relationships go. That's the critical thing. So people who've been with us for ages, it's because the relationship with them, because the support we've provided them, that capacity for them to live the best life they can. And then also working through the crap times when they're not doing badly or when we've, you know, workers not doing all that sort of stuff. There's been that strength of relationship and honesty to talk about and to work through stuff. Because don't pretend, you know, if we've supported someone for 40 years that every moment's been gold. It won't be. We don't pretend it will be. But it's if you've got a strong relationship, you can go through those things. And it's a big issue for us. How we go in the future. We've got about 1,400 staff. We look after about 1,400 people. And they come right across the state, you know, Orbost to nil. So what's really important for someone in Orbost is going to be entirely different to sort of someone living in Dandenong. There's going to be different dynamics and stuff. And so we're looking at how do we do this? How do we make sure that we're getting good feedback from people? And it will be an ongoing journey for us. And if we don't do it right, we'll annoy people. We'll crap people off. I mean, my personal example is, so my daughter has an NDIS package. And I got rid of this woman really quickly. We had a support coordinator appointed, and the support coordinator told my daughter, said, "Oh, you're really lucky to have the package you have." Like that was her starting point. So like she lasted about another 48 hours, you know, because there was no relationship, you know. As a parent, you sit there and go, no, she's got the package she's entitled to because of the National Disability Insurance Scheme. You know, I'm not disputing it, you know, so it's about the relationship.
So when you have these relationships with both your clients and your staff, because, you know, we're chatting today about how to keep staff and clients and have effective relationships with both, do you need a different culture and strategy and feedback mechanisms for staff than you do for clients, or is it all the same thing? So I know, for example, I've done client journey mapping, then I've gone off and I've done employee journey mapping. I used to send out an employee satisfaction survey and I used to send out a separate client satisfaction survey. I'm very good at repeating myself. How do you do it, and what are the best ways? And is it different? Is our relationship and how we manage and get feedback from our relationship with our staff different to how we do it with the people who we support?
It's not different in terms of, so this is personal belief here, the values, the way you treat staff must be exactly the way that you treat the individuals you support. That alignment can't be screwed up. If I'm out there treating the people we support really, really nicely, but I'm, you know, an utter draconian mongrel to the staff, there is a huge values misalignment within the organisation, and that will cause cracks and all sorts of nasty things. So your values, that relationship is critical. There are some differences. So in terms of a relationship you have with staff, like there's a power imbalance, like there is a management structure, no matter how flat you get it, there's a management structure, which means therefore you have the capacity to hire and fire. So you've got to look at the slight differences you have in those sorts of things. You know, then you look at the people we support and some of the families. Like, again, there's different values. Like, you can never, the passion that parents have for their child. So this is my child. I've raised this child since birth. Whatever's gone on's gone on. No matter what their disability and how successful or unsuccessful I've been, for the vast bulk of us, that passion you have for your kids is extraordinary and incredible, and that needs to be catered for. And there's a slightly different passion there for staff who go, I'm passionate about working in this sector. So you just got to try and be aware of those nuances and those sorts of things in what you structure. But it is about values. You've got to treat. You can't treat people you support really, really well, and you cannot go and treat your staff badly.
It is about values, absolutely. But when you're getting feedback, I was interested in something Fee said earlier when she's trying to, you know, some of her criteria in picking a provider or company to try is looking at the reviews. Now, those reviews, they're out on Clickability, they're out on Barista, they're on the NDIS grassroots discussion page. If you really are, you know, so if people are checking out those reviews, if a company you use asks you for feedback or to fill out a survey, do you fill it out?
Yeah, you have. Oh, look, yeah, we'll fill it. Like, it's. Really
I'm asking Fee.
Oh yeah.
I know you'll fill it out. You get paid.
Well, no, I actually try and avoid. Sorry, Fee. I actually try to avoid filling them out because, as a general manager, I'm supposed to say good things. So the worst feedback you're ever going to get is from someone like me, because even if I'm completely genuine in positive feedback, as a general manager, I'm supposed to say at Melbourne we're wonderful. So the best feedback for us is the people we support and their families. Sorry, Fee, I'll be quiet now.
That's all right. Absolutely. When I fill out surveys and questionnaires, I'm brutally honest. I generally always try to follow up the good with the bad with the good on what they could possibly do to correct what has happened. I think that, sorry.
No, you do fill them out, which is great.
No, absolutely. Every time, because I think it's important that every company, I guess whether you're a support company or whether you're a company that supports the company that supports, you're always learning. And without that feedback, you're not going to learn. And I think that's really important. Either good or bad criticism, you take it on and you learn from it.
Brilliant. And I mean, Rachel, we know that, you know, you'll actually get on the phone and say, hey, this is how I'm thinking, this is what I think of this worker, which is brilliant, but you've got the confidence to do that. Do you, if you get questionnaires and things from companies like your providers, do you let them know how you think you're going on them too?
Yep. I'm the same with Fee. I'm brutally honest. If I don't think they're doing a great job, that's where I tick the box. And if I think they're doing really well, then I tick that box. So it just depends on how they're treated.
Yeah. Christina, you're one of these guys that designs a lot of this in relation to workforce feedback. So, you know, if as a workforce development officer, what sort of tips or strategies do you use in setting up these feedback loops? So in your current job, between you and the broader workforce of your organisation?
Look, to be honest, we haven't really, in the time that I've been there, I haven't noticed that there's been any client feedback loops.
What about employee ones? Sorry? What about employee ones?
The employee ones, yes, we do them on a regular basis. So particularly centered around career development pathways and learning and development needs. So I've done a training needs analysis last year. This year I've done a workforce development plan. And in both instances, I have done surveys of staff. I have spoken with managers. I've spoken with other Aboriginal organisations, and gathering all that data, sort of analysed what we need to do in terms of developing our staff. And I suppose it's really interesting. There is a slight difference in terms of what staff expect, depending on whether they're Aboriginal or not. And I'm employed under the Aboriginal Workforce Development Initiative, which is particularly aimed at providing the development of Aboriginal staff, which puts me in a slightly awkward position because I don't want to be seen as developing only the Aboriginal staff. I want to be there to help with the development of any staff, whether they're Aboriginal or not. And our organisation is only about 50% Aboriginal, so that leaves 50% of staff who are not Aboriginal, but also service the Aboriginal community, so they also need to be developed. But like I was saying, there's a difference in terms of what the expectations are. So what I've noticed with some of our Aboriginal staff is that the level of qualifications and formal sort of education that they've had is significantly lower. And if any of you have read the Closing the Gap reports over the years, the one significant factor in terms of closing that gap is education. If we educate the Aboriginal workforce, what you find is that the employment outcomes are much, much better. So if we do want to close the gap, we need to provide those formal qualifications. So as part of my role, I have and that's indeed in the surveys that I've done, that's what I found, that people are seeking those formal qualifications. So if they've only completed year 10 or maybe, year 12, then they'll want to have at least a certificate or a diploma in something that they're working in or something that they aspire to.
So with that and finding out what they aspire to, I want to bring you back to when you said that, you get staff feedback via surveys and other ways. Like I know if we got 25-30% return on surveys, we thought we'd done a great job, that only 70% had chosen not to participate. And we thought, 25-30% was a fantastic response. How do you encourage people to want to respond? And how do you design a survey?
Managers.
How do you design a survey? Is it, like we all talk about satisfaction surveys and having conversations. Is there some science behind this? Does it, for people who might be watching this who haven't put out a client or staff survey before, can they buy a template? How do they design one? How do you do this?
Yeah, look, you can buy templates for learning and development surveys, or for any sort of survey. You want staff engagement or whatever. But look, I just use common sense. And I've done study in psychology. I've done study in human resources. So I've sort of drawn my knowledge of how to ask the right question to get the answers that I want. So I sort of feel confident in designing them. There might be people who don't feel confident, and so they have to purchase a template so that they get the answers that they want. But I guess my advice would be think about what is it that you want to know. So, and then design the question around that. In terms of getting the responses, always explain the what's in it for me. You have to tell people what are they going to get out of filling out that survey. So if you phrase it in a way that you say, look, this is to meet your development needs. So I had a huge response rate of nearly 80% on my survey last year when I did the training needs analysis. It was purely because people really wanted to let us know what their learning needs are and make sure that we cater to that.
I really
The
like
managers
how,
are also playing a crucial role in terms of encouraging their staff to complete the survey.
yeah, modelling is important. I really like how you talked about find out what's important to you and what you want to ask, what you want to know, and design from that. So, you know, find out what you want to know who you're talking to and how to communicate with them. And then I think number 3, show what you're doing with that. And the first time I was responsible for client and staff satisfaction surveys, I put them out. We got a great response rate. We learned a lot. They really helped our direction over the next 12 months. They impacted on the strat plan. It was really good information. And then next year I rolled them out again, and staff and clients uniformly said, Steve, why am I filling these out? We're not sure what you did with all the information we gave you last year.
Oh, you always have to feedback. You always have to provide feedback. When you receive people's results, you always have to write back to everybody and say, this is what's come out of the survey. This is what I've done with the information, and follow through. So if they said they want training in X, you give them training in X, so that they know that, yes, you've acted on what they've said. Otherwise, yes, of course, in the future, they're going to say, well, what's the point? I've asked for this and nothing was done about it.
I must say, it was a long time ago that happened, and I did learn from it. Now, Jade, you are nodding your head quite vigorously there. Feedback and communication and designing ways that we communicate to people, this is SAC's bread and butter, isn't it?
Yeah, look, it is. And I guess a lot of what Christina said, absolutely. In terms of if you're about to launch a survey or thinking about, I guess, pre-engagement is so important with your staff, and that is at the local level. So it's getting the team leaders involved, it's getting their managers involved, and it's really getting people to become advocates themselves. I guess the more you empower staff to be involved in the process, the likelihood of getting good response rates is going to be pretty strong. So whether that's an ability to run workshops about what we're doing, these are what the outcomes are that we're hoping to achieve, but also consulting in that, well, what would you like to know? What do you think are the real pressure points? What's important to you? And then you can obviously absorb that information in the way that you draft the questions. But I guess from a questions perspective, it's to keep them as simple as possible so that they are measuring the one thing that they're set out to measure. They're easily understood by a broad range of people, and that, yeah, they're measuring exactly what they're set out to do. And as Christina said, it's communicating the results, but more importantly, this is what we're going to do about it. And again, any way that you can involve the staff in those solutions. So perhaps we weren't happy with the result we got for X. Let's get together and let's talk about, well, what do you think we could do to improve this? Again, it's sort of creating that engagement and that empowerment for them to be part of the solution. And you do find that they'll tend to then job craft, take ownership, accountability, and that leads to so many positive outcomes for themselves and the people that they're supporting.
Do you guys, whether it's any panel members, if you're designing these feedback mechanisms, do you pilot them first?
I'll go. We've had, this has been the year of COVID. We've had extraordinary success this year too, because it's hard to sit around with people. We ring people. So you just put a morning aside and 3 or 4 of you just do a ring around for a whole group of people and just checking in what are they doing or whatever the topic is, getting feedback, and it leads you into conversations. And we've just been prepared to go with the conversation. So some have been quick, 2 or 3 minutes. That's all someone's wanted to engage with us. Some have gone for half an hour because people, wanted to talk, wanted to put information out to you. So
method of engagement it makes a huge difference, Dave. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, so that's been valuable for us this year. Yeah,
because we did a trial once. We send through. We did hard copy surveys, the same survey via email, SurveyMonkey. So we SurveyMonkey, hard copy mail, and phone calls. And phone calls, we got the best response and the most information from. What we learned, what we didn't learn, what we were worried about at the beginning, though, was the people making the phone calls, making them in a way that they weren't going to lead a response. Was there anything you could do around making sure that when you used the phone call method, that a really well-intentioned worker was saying, so that was all right then, really, wasn't it?
That's a really good question. I think we just wanted to ring people. I mean, there was a range of things we talked about, so we let people know this is what we're here to talk about.
Well, that didn't really matter, did it, Dave?
Yes, it does, Stephen. It's really
important. I'm leading on purpose. I'm being obstreperous.
Yeah, no, I get that. No, you raised an interesting question. No, can I sit here today and go, oh, did we lead anybody? No, I don't know. I don't think so. I think what worked for us, like the phone calls, all of this stuff, seeking information, was quite genuine. So I think everybody who was making the phone call was genuinely inquiring. And I hope that came across, because I don't think we ever said it. Like, I would never ring someone and say, listen, by the way, I'm genuinely inquiring about topic X, because it means every other time I rung them, I don't care. But I just think, you know, I would hope sort of like our empathy, our demeanour, whatever, just came across as going, yeah, this is a genuine phone call. We're not just doing this to sort of waste time or tick some box somewhere. Yeah, good point. You know, so maybe I need to speak to Jade and you know, what I should do, say better, I don't know. I would hope across the organisation that when we do this stuff, there's a genuine reason for inquiry, and that whole thing about the tone of your voice, you know, the way you speak, that sort of stuff comes across for you. There you go.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay.
Now, and Angela from the audience has just asked about permissions. Fee and Rachel, if you were just rung up and asked for a survey or sent a survey, so do we need permissions to call and engage? Fee's nodding.
I find that if somebody just rings me out of the blue, as rude as it is, depending on what I'm doing, and at the moment I'm flat out at work, I will dismiss that survey altogether. I'm quite happy. I'm more than happy to fill out a paper version coming in the mail, especially if it is from a service provider that I am going with. I think it's important that when you actually sign with the service provider or with the company, I guess it's not just support people, it's sort of even electricity or whatever, to when you join up with that company or that organization, it's important to get that permission to be contacted, because a lot of people don't actually want to do that. If they have an issue, they will phone you and they will let you know. And as important as these surveys are, I do believe that you should sort of have permission, or at least give them notice, plenty of notice of what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve, with open-ended questions.
Jade, permissions and professional ethics and compliance, is it hard to juggle all that? What do we need to watch for?
Yeah, so I guess if you're doing a survey, guaranteeing one's confidentiality is extremely important. So I guess we undertake all our engagement under the Australian Psychological Society Code of Ethics. So we have obligations under that, but not to make them mandatory. So, and obviously to send an email if it is online, providing information about what it will entail, how long it will take. If there are, just say, for example, you're doing a staff survey in an organisation and you've got a team, at least 3 responses to anonymise the data, just so that's just a way to ensure. So if it's any less than 3, then it can become a little bit tricky in terms of ensuring one's confidentiality. And we make it really clear that if there are the opportunity to provide open text comments that you don't self-identify, and obviously they're reviewed ahead of being sort of presented to the client in case there is anything to be mindful of. But no, that's something that, yeah, every organisation should take very seriously.
What about, and whether it's for employees or for clients, customers, participants, what about exit interviews? Does anyone here either find out why staff and client leave through exit interviews? And from Rachel and Fee's perspective, when you leave a provider, why, and do you tell them why you're leaving? So
Well,
we start with,
sorry, I've actually had to literally, with one of the companies, I actually spoken to the CEO because I had a meeting with the CEO, and then finding out, because I was having issues with that particular company, and so the CEO decided to have a meeting with me to discuss some stuff with me. So it was a face-to-face sort of situation. Apparently people he was employed to work with were going behind his back and doing the wrong thing. And so I still got treated like disrespect. So I was told to give him a ring if I had anything goes wrong, to let him know. So I did. I don't know if that person's still in that environment and still working there. I don't know. But he was a CEO, and he was actually poor what the staff were doing to me at the time. So I decided I've just have to change company. It's not his fault. I just have to change companies. I couldn't put up with the selfishness of the staff, just not doing anything. That was my experience with the NDIS when I provider when so I left that company to go to somewhere else.
and you left because you weren't listened to.
Yep.
Yep.
Exit interviews, we try and get them staff while people are leaving service, those sort of things. It's not always easy, particularly if there's some level of conflict there, but it's always trying to get it. I also fully understand if a family or an individual supported wanted to leave, they might just be going, I'm out, I'm done, and getting feedback from them will be tricky, but it's a really critical thing to do. And one of the hard things within any organisation, this sort of like comes to the culture, is like every we at Melbourne, we have a range of, policies, procedures, protocols, rules. Like any organisation, there's probably another booklet somewhere unpublished of the hidden rules, and every organisation's got them. Sort of like, the social norms that we adopt and those sort of things, and they're things that also within your culture you need to be aware of. It's doing that sort of stuff there. There remains, I think, across families, a power imbalance. Some families who've been in this system for years and years and years still, I don't think, have yet to fully grasp, which is a shame, but fully grasp the power they may have. It's their package. I think we've still got work to do in those areas where families should speak up more or could speak up more. We've joked about it for years, the water cooler conversations. So someone's making a cup of tea, having a chat to their mate. So there's all those so there's a whole, my perfect survey tool is and this is when I was a CEO running a disability organisation, and I accept all the legalities, my perfect survey tool was a microphone so I could record all the conversations people made a cup of tea. That would have given me information that was gold. I accept it's illegal. I accept I'm not allowed to do it. I'm just purely raising that as a thing that could have been worth having.
We all want to mic up our car parks. So
yes.
Car park chats and cooler chats. But I think the other thing you say there is, you can't do, it's illegal, but we also know that we can't do anything about them, that you can't control some of those informal cultures. You can guide, you can have your values, you can recruit well, you can listen. So, Rachel and Fee have said it's been really important that if they do have something to say, they get listened to. You can do all that. But people are always going to have a chat on their way to their cars or on their way to a water cooler.
Can I just go? And I think we just need to keep constant reiterating it's okay to complain. I know the Disability Commissioner put this out a while ago. It's dropped off the board. I wish there was an ongoing campaign letting people know it is okay to complain. If we do not get the complaints, we can't fix them. So I wish more and more people would complain. And as more people complain, they're also more likely to compliment. But we should keep working on people. It's okay to complain. If you're not happy, tell us.
So
Steve, sorry, going back on the question that you asked before, is it important to sort of, exit interviews? Looking at it both from in my previous position of hiring and firing and training, and looking at it from a participant's point of view, I think it's actually really important. In the past, when I have unfortunately had to let someone go in my previous roles, I've taken the time to sit down, have a chat, have a coffee. I don't like to end things in a bad way. Have a chat. I think everyone has the right to understand what's going on, what they could have done to improve, and possibly what they can do in the next position that they come across differently to improve that. And the same goes with when you're exiting a provider, a support person. You need to communicate with them, let them know what they could be doing better, not necessarily just what they've done wrong. Of course, express how you feel and the hurt, the frustration, and even the anger at times, but definitely give them the opportunity to know what they could be doing better for the next person.
Brilliant. Thank you. One of the things that I've been thinking about in what you've just said there, Fee, is that when you're having this conversation, I was thinking also about, when Rachel spoke to that manager and said, this is what I'm not happy about, she didn't feel she was managed. So I think Dave's absolutely right. It's okay to complain. But I think a piece of work we might need to do in our workforce is it's okay to receive a complaint. It's okay to be complained against or to be complained about. Jade or Christina, how do you build that professional resilience and mindset in a workforce? It's okay to be complained about.
Look, I think there's a way in which that can be delivered. It's obviously such crucial information to have, but if it's able to be delivered in such a way that it actually sort of feeds forward, so this is what's happened, but this is what we're going to do about it to prevent it from occurring again, depending on obviously what the context was. But certainly that layer of feed forward, as opposed to more disciplinary type conversations, really about understanding what took place, the significance of that, the outcome that it had, but what we're going to do about it next time. So I mean, that's absolutely really important for that continuous improvement and development, and that in turn will enhance one's resilience to be able to have those types of conversations that they might not feel necessarily comfortable with.
Any other thoughts on, hey, how do you personally and professionally deal with receiving a complaint about yourself?
When I go out and ask my team or our team, peer leaders, you can generally see or you have a feeling of if somebody's not happy with what's going on. So I sort of put it out there, sort of letting them know that this is what's happened, this is the way we've been doing it, but also give them the option to have an input in what they believe could make the situation better, because no one's perfect. There's always going to be those situations that can be improved. In fact, every situation can be improved. Everyone has a different idea of what's right and what's wrong. So the most important thing to do is get your team together, have an open communication, active listening, and really take in what everyone has to say and try and come to a compromise.
We'll see in our group at New Wave, even though we're not actually in our building at the moment, but what happens with me and the other person as the peer leaders is we get asked to leave the room, and then people go around the table asking what they're doing, bad or good, and then we come back and they'll give us either the bad or good news. And last time, one of it was about sharing the actual sharing the actual agenda or minutes. And I said, okay, we can start doing stuff like that. And we have been doing it even through Zoom meetings, taking in turns. Somebody else does the meetings, the agenda, and somebody else will take the minutes at meetings. And if need to, I can help with the reading if someone have speech impairments or can't read and write. I sort of help that group out. But that's the kind of thing we do. We sort of find out if we're doing bad or good by having those kind of meetings, and we leave the room and come back.
I think we all need to accept, you know, because I'd like to say that in my entire career, no one's ever complained about me. But I could be lying. I think we have to accept when that happens, and when we've, you know, like I've both received and I've had to deliver information to people. We need to accept, number one, the first time you hear it, it hurts, it annoys you. You know, you've got to go through that sort of process there. But then how do we encourage, I mean, it's effectively how do we encourage people to walk into the room of mirrors, and how do you as an individual walk into the room of mirrors and go, okay, reflect on what was said, where it came from, why it's being said. And so as an organisation, what you've got to do is make sure that you encourage that process to allow it to happen. So it's not a matter of going, well, you've done the wrong thing, someone's complained about you, on your bike, sunshine, get it right next time. It's about enabling some time to go through, check in with that person, you know, because you've got to go, is that person genuinely a good person? Is everything else they've done been terrific? Well, okay, they're a terrific person. There's been an error here. Let's work through this. Let's get it right. So I think it's enabling a process to enable that to happen, and allowing the person you're going, you've cocked up, like give them 24 hours to, you know, struggle with that and get angry and get annoyed and go through all the, no, I didn't, yes, I did, all that sort of stuff. It's just allow a process in there.
And also, I think, allow people to make mistakes, because, you know, and because if they're too scared about making a mistake, that 24 hours where they need to process it, they will be a week or a month, because they're going to be too scared about consequences. But and about how you have those conversations.
That's the big picture, isn't it? Because we're always continually asked to be innovative, but never make mistakes. Like that's just, you know, so that's the big picture. Yes, please go and be innovative, but never make a mistake, never cock up, never do the wrong thing, never bring us into whatever it's going to be. If you're going to be innovative, you're going to make mistakes. If you're going to work with people and have relationships, you're going to make mistakes, you know. You know, the really simple one for me is I think of what I was like as a 15-year-old, you know, like several centuries ago. The stupid things I did trying to impress girls were just horrific, you know, but that's what you are when you're a 15-year-old male in country Victoria thinking you're clever. So we learn, we get wiser, we get smarter, all those sort of things down the track. That's what it is. Yeah.
I mean, some of the key words here, I mean, you're talking about, you know, reflective practices. Steve was talking about active listening. You know, these are really key terms. But they also come back to reflective practices and active listening. They come back to culture and values, surely.
Yeah, they do. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And strategy, culture, values, and strategy. So how do you work out, how much do we need to know about different management styles? Do we need to be able to define flat structure, self-managed teams, matrix management? There's lots of different management styles out there. Then the old hierarchical management style. Then you've got leadership styles, you know, all the different types of leadership styles. Like there's about 15 different management styles, matrix and the rest of it, and 15 different leadership styles. How do I pick one?
I think your personality will, and your own style will help you pick one. So I'll let you in on a secret here, like, because there's only the few of us chatting here. Like part of my role is running communications for Melbourne, doing those sort of things there. So comms is a really interesting thing to go and do, because you go and draft a whole lot of stuff and someone goes, no, I want it written like this, or no, I want. So we're continually having our work sent back to us with alterations, and that's okay. That's part of the comms role. So it's the same in terms of leadership management, all those sorts of things. You know, one of my recommended readings for anybody is Machiavelli. Like, you need to learn to work with people. You need to understand personality types. How do you work with them? How do you get the best out of them? You know, and I always recommend, always come from the glass half full area. Like, here's someone, here's their personality type, here's how they see the world, here's how they operate. Right, how do we work together to make this the best relationship it can be, as opposed to going, well, there's 3 things you do I don't like, and I'm just going to get grumpy and tear you down. Like, and that's the journey, you know. And let's be honest, some days on a Monday you can't be bothered having that journey. But you know, overall, you know, that's where you got to get to. So it's, yes, pick a leadership style. But it's, again, I come back to, it's a relationship, looking at individuals. How do you work well with them? How do you change that? You know, how can you inspire them to do better? How can you celebrate the skills they've got that you haven't got? Yeah.
I think self-reflection and communication, active listening can be quite challenging for some people. I think no matter what level of management you're on, I think that if you're willing to listen to the person below you, so to speak, because I actually, no matter what level there is, I don't believe that there's anyone below another person. We're just at different stages in our professional career. We are all learning, and that person coming up behind you may have knowledge or understanding of other people or personalities that you don't understand. So the most important part of that is, again, active listening and to be empathetic, to have that understanding of all different people, all different cultures, personalities, religions, races, the way people think.
But just,
Jade,
sorry,
go on.
just about leadership, I wanted to say it's really important to have leaders that are actively engaged, that so it's not just about the workers listening to the clients and the needs, but the leaders of the organisation, the management, including the CEO, need to be responsive to clients. So one thing I've noticed with the Aboriginal community is that everybody talks and you know, sometimes the community, instead of going directly, the way we get our feedback often is via the management. The community goes directly to the leaders and says, I'm not happy with the service, I need this done. And it's amazing how quickly and responsive it is when you have that sort of feedback loop where management take responsibility and respond to client needs.
Absolutely. Now, Jade, SACs are in quite a unique position because you know who recruits more frequently and less frequently than others, and you also know who they hire. Now, we're not asking for any trade secrets because, you know, you're too professional, and I tried offline and you wouldn't give me there either. In relation to that leadership style and management style, what's your tips on because our audience today are small providers and large providers, some people who are used to doing this and are used to reviewing it, and some people who are doing this for the first time in their new companies. How do they work this out with leadership and management and flat structure and matrix and whatever it is?
Yeah, I think, look, you really need to be adaptive in the way that you approach your interactions with people. So one, it will depend on the audience, it will depend on the context, but as you are progressing throughout your career, and if you are taking management or leadership positions, there are going to be times where you do need to be top down. You need to make those decisions, but you also need to make it really clear to everyone why you made that decision. So again, that's where that communication and transparency, if possible, comes in. But that facilitative leadership is something that we talk to a lot of clients about. So when to be a boss, when to be a leader, facilitate other people to then go out and lead others. So it's bringing a sense of empowerment, it's engaging with your staff. But look, there are going to be times where you do need to make those difficult decisions. But again, active listening, being informed, consulting with who you need to consult with to be informed to make that decision. I guess that's really what we suggest and recommend. And we undertake a lot of training with leadership teams and groups on how to become sort of more of those facilitative leaders.
I think I really like the term facilitated leader. I also really like you talking about training. So in their industry, like many other industries, quite often managers are just over promoted support workers. And I put myself in that boat. I then realised I had to go and get training. I had to go and learn this management stuff or this team leader stuff isn't as easy as it looks. I do need to access support. I mean, Christina has a significant tertiary education and professional experience behind her when she designs a survey. It's not just something she did over breakfast for the first time. It wasn't a skill she was born with. It's a skill she's nurtured and got training in. So how do people get more training on this? Where do they? And this isn't just an ad for SACS. This is a genuine question. Hey, I've realised I need some help with this for my company or my team. Where do I go? Do I go to Google?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a lot of resources online which you can utilize. I guess the way that SACS approaches any engagement is to take an evidence-based approach. So we take the findings of research and then translate that into what our clients are wanting to achieve. So we have a suite of intellectual property and a number of different training programs, one of which is facilitated leadership. So yeah, I guess that's the point of difference, is that it's tailored to the organisation, it's tailored to their values, it's tailored to put them in the best position to deliver on their strategy. And whatever their service provision is, or if they're a commercial organisation, what they're at to achieve, it's really tailored in such a way to really maximise their opportunity to learn new skills. But I guess you're right. I think subject matter experts, technical experts, they progress and all of a sudden they're leading a team, which isn't what they necessarily thought. So it is about understanding what the appropriate behaviours are and how to form those relationships as you do progress.
Now, we've got a question from Jackson, and he asks, in a mostly autonomous industry providing in-home support, so we've got 200 or 300 support workers who we never see in the office because they're in clients' homes. How do we manage employee supervision, support and appraisal for a workforce that we very rarely see?
If anyone can answer that really accurately and really well, just set up a model, I'll make $1 million. This is where the whole it's something as an organisation we struggle with. So we have a range of people supporting people in community, and quite often their first responsibility they see is to the person they're providing support to. Not the organisation. And so if I'm going back over the there's been some conflict I've had in that sort of disability career. What's critical, I think, in that is you need to go to the people that are having the support delivered to them. And so we used to do ad hoc surveys to people. This is in an organisation I ran prior to being with Melbourne. So we would do ad hoc surveys with people, just ring them going, how you doing? How's your worker going? And we got, most of the time everyone was doing sort of kind of okay. From time to time we got really positive praise, and a couple of times we got feedback where effectively workers were sacked because what they're doing was irresponsible or wrong and doing that sort of stuff there. So it's contact with the families and making the time to have the contact with the families. That improves your organisational culture. That also, everyone, even if we're not seeing people in the office, I mean, they chat amongst themselves. So that sort of also then enhances the culture across those sorts of workers and doing those sort of things there. And the same sort of time it's getting to those workers and seeking their feedback. And again, it's going to be a combination of surveys and ringing and talking to the workers. How you doing? How you travelling? Like we're pack animals. Like it's why I get on well with dogs, because they're pack animals. And I get all the nuances with individuals, and some people like being alone and stuff like that. But we're all hardwired through years and years and years of evolution to get on with other people. So we need to do that sort of stuff. Don't throw your hands up in the air. It's not a mystery. Get on the phone. We've still got that technology. Talk to people, how they're doing, how they're traveling. We're not going to pick up everything. It's not 100% fail-proof method, but there we go.
There are lots of other ways, and you're right. Communication is the key. Picking up the phone. I used to do a bulk SMS or a bulk email out to all staff, and it was just, if they know that you feel comfortable having a chat to them, they can feel comfortable chatting to you. So when you do an appraisal, they're more likely to use it. So there's a lot of apps out, people using WhatsApp and other things in relation to team chats. But if you want people to communicate to you, the first thing you have to do is communicate to them. And that's, Dave saying, hey, let's have a chat. That's me sending out a weekly manager or CEO email that I used to do. It's people feeling comfortable that they know that they can communicate. But the other thing is that we're doing this and to, we're doing this for a workforce, as Jackson says, that he may very rarely see, because they're going from their home to their client's home, even though they're our employees. So it's still saying, hey, how do we have that brand loyalty to our company when they never really see the company? And how do we do this to a fragmented workforce under NDIS costing?
The joy of COVID is we've all now embraced technology. We're doing this by technology. So at one level, I think this year has broken down the fact that the phone, Zoom, Teams, whatever, FaceTime, whatever it's going to be, has now become quite a legitimate tool in terms of engaging with people. It's not the only way, it's not the be all and end all, but it's a really now accepted sort of way. So one of the good things out of COVID is it's just made us embrace this world. So I mean, I think that's a real positive in terms of communication. Yeah.
The other thing I think I'd like to touch on with Jackson's question is a lot of companies are growing really quickly. So they may have had, a couple of people, a couple of directors, and they might have 15 staff, and then 12 months later, they've got 200 to 300 staff. But they haven't necessarily brought in team leaders or managers. So you've got a couple of really hard-working company directors that are working 15 hours a day managing their growth, controlling their reputation, saying, well, how do I keep this up? What and any tips there? So I'm thinking maybe yes.
I think it's important to bring in the idea of team leaders. I don't think any one person can handle, to be honest, if you want to keep in contact with your employees, especially if they are out and about and they're not necessarily in an office, they're out supporting people, I believe that you should have a smaller team where that team has got one person that they can build that rapport with. And then that team leader reports to another one. So, the feedback sort of does go up the chain and then can change possibly the systemic outcomes of the company altogether of what is actually working and what's not. I don't believe any one person can look after, say, 50 people comfortably and do it in a professional way that both is good for the employee as well as the participant.
Christina, I want to bring you in here because if we're going to assist a subject matter expert, as Jade was saying, so if we're going to grow and develop, say, a support worker or a direct care worker to become a team leader or to become a manager or to become CEO, how do we do that? Because, there's not a whole lot of team leaders hanging on the tree in the backyard saying, I'll come and work for you. We often need and want to grow our own workforce.
Definitely. So we're just in the process of developing a succession plan for our organisation. That's the first start. You've got to start having conversations with management about who is your key talent. So who are those key workers in your team that you want to develop, that you see has potential? And at the same time, of course, you've got to check with those people whether they have the right aspirations, because there's no point developing somebody who doesn't aspire to those positions. So once you've got those two things, then you look at, okay, well, what do we need to do to provide the right opportunities? Formal qualifications is one thing, so you can, obviously enroll them into management courses or develop particular skills that they might lack. So you might identify they've got some gaps in terms of facilitation or management or presentation skills or public speaking skills or whatever. But in addition to that, you've got to provide a lot of informal learning. So provide them with opportunities to step up. And when they step up, give them mentoring and guidance. And that mentoring and guidance needs to come directly from the managers.
What about, and this is a question again to Christina and Dave, what about peer mentoring? So, would you have peer mentor roles at Dandenong District Beverages Co-op Limited or at Melba? Is there a lived experience peer mentoring role to help in that professional mentoring? I'm putting you both on the spot.
Not with us so much.
We don't specifically have peer mentoring roles and that sort of capacity there. I think what we're doing, I think we're doing it, but it's not by conscious design, it's by unconscious design. I think that, like, there's enough of us have been in the sector or been in management long enough, and you kind of go, as we all get older, therefore you become mortal. You know, I'm no longer the bulletproof 18-year-old who's going to live forever.
Yeah.
So I think, so like, just consciously we're all going, like, we want, because we love the organisation so much, because we want this organisation to be around in 200 years' time, we're also going, right, what I need to set up today to make that happen is. So I think there's a whole lot of work going on without being sort of like consciously identified until you've asked that question about that sort of stuff, making sure that if anyone, when one of us falls over, gets hit by the proverbial bus, whatever it's going to be, that the organisation is right to carry on and the organisation is right to continue. And I think within that, there's a whole range of effectively peer mentoring, peer conversations going on throughout the organisation, you know. And maybe that's just, see, Steve, well done. You just unpacked this little hidden bit of culture at Melba that
it's going to inform strategy later on.
Oh, no, let's not call it strategy, because then we'll just get stupid about it. And let's just keep talking our strategies about being really good for people.
No, I'm going to wind up in a minute because it's 7 to 11. But before I do, and I'm going to recognise that we haven't even talked about some of the carrots that are often discussed. We haven't talked about casual employment versus permanent part-time. We haven't talked about traineeships. We haven't talked about client incentives such as discounts or loyalty fees or any of those other sort of customer-based in relation to maintaining client relationships. And they're probably a whole other topic. We're not going to get those things covered in 7 minutes. But I think what I really like is this talk about communication and engagement. If I'm going to go around the panel now and just ask for your top tips to if you could say anything, hey, this is how you maintain staff, this is how you maintain clients. My top tip is, who wants to start?
Start in terms of talking about maintaining engagement with the workforce. It's really about clarity of goals, articulating that clarity, but also that recognition as well. So people want to feel heard, they want to feel valued, they want to contribute to the greater good. So it's allowing those opportunities, that real world practice as well. Engagement is absolutely key, but acknowledgement and recognition is crucial.
Rachel, if you could say anything to a provider about, hey, I will stay with you if, what's the biggest thing you'd like to say to an NDIS provider?
Make sure, one, respect us. I mean, seriously, you need to be respected. I mean, how would they like it if, you know, they got treated disrespectful? And two, listen to us. We're the ones with the disabilities, doesn't matter what sort of disabilities we've got, listen to us because we know what we're talking about.
Brilliant.
And so that's my opinion for now on for anybody with the NDIA or NDIS.
Brilliant. Who's next?
It would be for a provider as a participant would be to show empathy, try and understand my situation, have quality support, consistency. In other words, sort of don't just show up one day and not show up the next without any prior notice. If you're going to come into my house and support me, don't do what you think is needed, do what I think is needed, because you're there to support me, not support yourself. Also, I think that just going to add this on in the end, I think there needs to be, the providers need to think about consequences in their actions. as a participant, if we give you less than 24 to 48 hours notice, you still charge us. But you can give us 15 minutes or not show up at all, and there's absolutely no consequence to you. Well, and if there is, we don't see it as a participant, and we don't like it. So maybe think about those things.
Equilibrium, I think that's a really good point, Faye. Equilibrium, absolutely. Christina.
Just to recap on some of the things I've mentioned before, I think in terms of making sure that you have the right people, recruit based on values, not just skills. That's a big one. And another message I'd have is make sure you develop your people, particularly those that will be potential leaders in your organisation. Provide them with all the opportunities that you can. Provide them with clear career pathways, education and training that they aspire to. And if they're Aboriginal, particularly give them the formal educational opportunities that, you know, that are so crucial.
Thank you. Dave.
From the people we support, my attitude is always going to be, it's your life, what do you want? And every organisation has to grasp the fact that the only reason we exist is because people require our support. So we've got to make sure that we deliver that and we give good customer service. End of story. If you can't grasp that, if organisations go out of business because they're not delivering that good, they should go out of business. They're rubbish. From the point of view as a manager in an organisation and someone who is 6'4", I've known for years that one size does not fit all. So any mongrel who puts out a piece of clothing that says one size fits all, you are a liar and I hate you. It's just, that's just my personal view. Running an organisation with all the complexity of the things we do, we have to accept the fact that one size does not fit all. So with whatever we're going to do, embrace that factor, look for the nuances you need to go and get the responses and to deliver the quality organisation you want to be.
Thank you.
Sorry, Steph, can I just add one more thing? Sorry, with the training, as Christina and I think Jaden, Dave has sort of said in the past, I also believe that the training needs to involve active listening, how to build rapport, understand the difference between just walking into someone's house and actually building a rapport, building that trust, that respect, the person-centered, being that the person that you are looking after knows best.
Brilliant.
So that needs to be more, I think, in a lot of industries, but we're looking at the provider side of things that needs to be inbuilt more into the training.
Yep. Thank you. Now, with that, I'd like to thank all of you, Dave, B, Rachel, Christina and Jade. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us on this panel. As you either entered or leave this webinar, you'll see a questionnaire. Please fill it out, especially the question in relation to what other topics would you like us to discuss. We will review what happens with 2021 as an EDSN panel. Please let us know a couple of things, anything that you would like us to discuss. Prior to this year, we used to meet and do this live. So we'll certainly also have a discussion about whether we keep this as a Zoom format or go back live. So that's some of the things the EDSN committee will do over summer. So feel free to contribute to that by letting us know what you'd like us to talk about and where. If you want further information on the EDSN and to join us, or on the Brisbane Regional Care Workforce Program, that information will also be available through the questionnaire and through follow-up. Thank you all very much. We hope that we get to see you a lot more in 2021 as EDSN comes back next year in a new format and in a new year. And I'm sure we're all looking forward to a new year starting. Thanks again and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.